Jake, welcome to Whistle Talks. Thank you so much for being here with us.
It's a pleasure, Kayla. Nice to be hosted here. Thank you.
Before we get started, could you please give us a little bit of background into your history of being in the industry of sales, how you've led to being here with us today?
Sure. Well, I'm a transplant. I've worked in many different geographies. I'm, Canadian by born and bred. I lived in Europe for a while, and now I'm in the Mideast building businesses and high tech, particularly. All the time I started actually in marketing, which is more of a, what I say, cost center as opposed to a profit center. Then I went into entrepreneurial endeavors. I built a couple of my own businesses. And you're very sensitive to the expenditures. So you are very mindful of the sales. So I actually moved from marketing much more into the sales to make sure that those dollars are spent and then are generating the revenue. And so I've been doing that for various companies. I've built a couple of my own, thankfully, and to a greater and some lesser extent, which has been terrific. And I've been building significant companies as well. So I guess there's a lot to be learned, but really international sales and marketing. That's what I've been in the high tech sectors, everything from, baby bootstrap to, tens and tens of millions of dollars. That's the area I play, leading the go-to-market, first customers, product market fit, and then up to expansion and going up market. That's the area.
That's amazing. So the topic we're going to be speaking about is sales conferences, especially the power of meeting your customers at sales conferences and what's happening currently in terms of conferences and what might have changed over the last couple of years, and just the power of that. At the moment, what are some current approaches that people are using in terms of conferences and rather relying on digital tools as opposed to actually meeting up in person and networking?
So first and foremost, it all depends on where your targets are, but I think I want to talk about the conference, not necessarily only for lead gen at site and for brand building on site. I want to talk about the power for remote sales. And, we've become so accustomed to automation and AI and tools like ChatGPT and Clay and automated outreach platforms. Oftentimes we actually put a distance between ourselves and the clients, and we get something that works kind of, and then we try and scale that. Just to make it a little bit clearer, we're hiring very young folks who are in their 20s, not necessarily any business acumen or experience, and we're expecting them to connect with our ICPs who are generally much more advanced in their careers. And so they actually don't have the nomenclature. They're not familiar with how to speak the right language. And so they use, these tools that I've just outlined as to, okay, here let's make a best guess as to what your pain is. And so they go and they get some sort of response rate, reply rate, but you can see that it's profitable from a digital point of view. But here I want to point out maybe how it can be really augmented. Those results can be augmented by a little bit of customer interaction. And I know that as sales folks, we also get on phone calls. And I think that everyone should be on those phone calls and not just the gong style listening to the calls, but actually just try and fumble through the words and see whether or not they come out. So I'm a big fan of getting that customer experience. There's so many stories of CEOs sitting in support desks and taking phone calls. The CEO of Southwest Airlines was, famous for this, that he would manage the support so he could see exactly what was going on. And so we're such a remote team, you in Africa, and all of our clients around the world. Yes. I think that this is where we've lost this connectivity with our clients. And so I would say that, conferences in and of themselves, as a brand presence, as immediate lead generation, has a huge value. So I'm not going to talk about that. We can make a whole other talk about that. But more, I'm talking about the opportunity to improve our remote sales, our inside sales. And that right now we kind of get it. And that if we're successful, there's a modicum of success. But I'm really advocating for getting our salespeople in front of our clients. And that can be with more experienced AEs, that could be even part of the marketing team. But I really am whole hog in favor of that. And I can detail, endless reasons why. Just top of the mind, say, what we say to them. I mean, understanding, that we call it the messaging. We can say that's really, we get it kind of right. And then by the time it goes through all of our AI editors and Grammarly, it looks quite different. It looks soft and it's emotionless. It's so stale. It's so easy to see, okay, what is a human written or computer written? And I think that the opportunity here is you have to outpace and you have to do better than the Autobots. And I think that really having some human interaction is critical to this. And then that's not just about the messaging, but it's really understanding the business context. And I don't think that there's the emotional layer even in messaging, you can't get that until you've actually had a broader view into what these customers are doing. And I think that we probably forgotten that. We used to go, imagine you used to go door to door, you would actually see where your customer is and the environment they're in and what they're trying to get done. And then you see how your little doodad is such a small part of a bigger process. And so you actually have to understand what's in this person's world. And right now we go, oh, we look at the LinkedIn profile and we think, oh, I get it. No, that ain't who they are. They're a lot different than that. That's maybe what they did 5 years ago when they set up their LinkedIn. But they actually have a day-to-day rhythm. And what does it look like? What do they talk about? We're so
Yeah.
now. I mean, great for reply rates of 2%. Hooray! I mean, great for call success rate of 5%. But I think there's huge opportunity on that other side, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then there's a whole understanding of what's really bothering them, and how do we talk about it. There's so many categories of jargon that have been born in the sales realm. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that they're so detached from customers. No customer speaks like that. And so how do we get into customer speak, and how do we understand what's really bothering them? And what words do they use? So, I mean, I guess that those would be from the outset, I just did a big ramble to, messaging and pain, and understand really what we're trying to solve, and just really trying to get a bit bigger understanding of who it is we're speaking with that's behind the email, behind the LinkedIn and the calls.
Like you said, you're gaining buyer insights. I mean, conferences obviously are an amazing opportunity to kind of gather that information, as opposed to just researching online or thumb sucking or putting two and two together.
When you stand in a conference, you're really looking at who's walking by, and you're trying to understand who's going to be the person who's going to speak with me. And then I meet my customers, and then you start seeing patterns, and you start seeing who's coming and who's having a serious conversation. And there's just one insight. I mean, I know that if you've gone to shows, you understand it. The person who's drinking the conference coffee is not going to be the exec. That ain't the right person. And so you have to understand that they're a label person, that they went to get their macchiato specifically from Starbucks. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but if you don't understand that this person is not a compromising person, that maybe the saving a little bit of cost is not going to be the driver in their world. You have to understand about that they want things that are better. And so these Q on the watch, Q on the shoes, if there's spick and span. So those things are just subtleties that actually can really bring this out. When you choose your words then for phone calls, you're choosing different words, and it's based on those interactions. If you are more of an IT or a DevOps type of relationship, you can see a different tone and style to the communication as opposed to being a banking executive. And just going back to the problem, I mean, this is a young industry, that we're young and we don't necessarily have those experiences. I've sold to many banks. Have you ever banked with anything? Have you gone and met these executives? And so that is this gap that we need to try and close. And given that we're probably going to have this anywhere, it's important that we put our frontline people actually in front line, and we actually give them more of an exposure to this. You'll start seeing crazy things. You'll start seeing how they describe them. You'll get them chatting. You don't have to, in a sales conversation, we call this discovery, right? But in a conference, you can get them to discuss, oh, what you working on. It's something so subtle. It's not a discovery. It's not in a phone interview where I'm trying to get them into my next meeting, but you're trying to actually get them to say, oh, what are you working on? And then they will prioritize immediately. Oh, and how's that going? What's tough about that? Just more natural language conversation. Then you start quoting them back in their verbatims. You try that. Use those quotes and put it back into your sales conversations. You'll see a world of difference. I mean, there's also interesting things about, nonverbal. Like you'll see that after time and time again, sometimes we don't get the ICP right, and we start saying, oh, it could be this and that. You start seeing this deferment where you're in a conversation, and at a certain point, people back off, not necessarily from oh, I'm not interested. It's just, you're above my pay grade, or I need the legal. So you actually start getting a sense of, oh, okay, no problem. You want to pause this conversation? Where do you want to pick it up? What's on your mind? It's an interesting, you can't ask that what's on your mind on a phone call. It doesn't work. So just to give a little bit of more context, like what does a buying committee look like? You get a broader understanding. It was wild. I was at a car finance conference, however sexy that sounds. I don't know what it is. I mean, you start seeing this like tears and cliques. It's so funny, but you would start seeing that people you think that they're all prospects, but then they see each other and they don't see each other as reference customers. And so you start understanding a
Mm,
little bit of that. And you would never understand because on the outside from your digital tools and your Apollo searches, they look very similar. So these are some of the nuances that you wouldn't pick up on. And I would say one is you got to staff up anyways at the conference. And there's just so many reasons for bringing the people who are going and are tasked for generating the opportunities, for doing the demand generation, setting up the meetings. It may not be the first thing I would do. I would certainly get them trained and getting up to the 5 on 10. But in terms of moving people forward and not just for promotion track, but also to accelerate their performance within the organization, I think having first line exposure, and I'm not saying passive exposure, but listening into calls, I'm saying put them out there. Put them out there to help with the visibility and get into those own discussions, and you can see actually the results will start shining in terms of many of those other aspects we were talking about. If it's better messaging, if it's understanding who is the ICP and who's not, about using words that reflect the customer, the specific customer, about really discerning like which clique of people am I with and how do I determine if you
yeah,
are really the decision maker or you're someone else. And then that, I
yeah.
mean, my experience has been that that's been a great amplifier for that.
You are all for managers, directors, CEOs visiting conferences and taking a handful of people with them.
Yeah, they have to be an outbound person. They have to be a
Yes,
or Red Bulled and caffeinated in order to get out into those conversations. But that's the same personality that would be in the phone. So some people, it's out of
true.
their it's out of their natural
Awesome.
behavior. They're comfortable hiding behind a phone here, but
Yeah,
actually you can practice those things, and you can practice the pickup lines in the elevator. You can practice those conversations. So those things actually can be learned. And the person by nature is knowledgeable. They know about the product, they know about the pitch, they know about all these things. They just actually have to step forward. And I think that if you have someone who's a go-getter, and that's what they have to be anyways on the phone or behind the office, then a little bit of training can put them out, and I think that you'll see high rewards, definitely.
like you said, immediate pipeline acceleration. It's a no-brainer. Which conferences that you've been going to work really well that you will attend often? Could you maybe recommend a few?
I'm so reluctant to do that because we're talking
Okay.
about different customers and different ICPs. But I'll tell you that there's a certain formulaic approach, and then that could really qualify for anyone. I mean, I want to understand the number of attendees. I want to understand the price point that these people are paying. I mean, if it's a free venue, I'm like, that's probably not for me. That's going to be a lot of sifting through the sand. I then want to see the previous attendees list. Those are always masked, of course, but I want to see the titles. Are those titles going to give me a 10% hit rate or a 90% hit rate? And that's already deciding, what type of approach am I going to have? Is everyone going to be there suitable for me, or do I have to really pick through everybody? So I like to get some core stats on that. I also want to see my vendors. I want to see who's showing there. If they are so good and that is the right audience, then I would expect to see people in adjacent or even competitors there. I'm not afraid to go head to head. Actually, if I'm a small challenger, then I definitely want to go head to head. And I think I can at least bring in a conversation, and I think I can actually win the conversation. I also believe in the network, just like you and I know each other. I think that we would have a sense of, if it's a first conference, if we don't know anybody or it's a big bet, then I try and get a sense of who's been to this conference and what was their experience. It's important also to measure what was their goal. I mean, some people have brand. Oh, I just want to improve my visibility. I want to manage my existing customers. I think that it's important to align on those. But if we're in the demand side of this and we're trying to generate new conversations, I want to understand my relative proportion of the audience, how many are relevant for me, and of that audience attention, what percentage might I have? And of those, am I going against a competitor, or am I trying to create my own space there? And that's the kind of thinking. And so as you're going through different industries and different ICPs, that would be the approach to see how I would do it. There's obviously a
Yeah.
pre-game and a post-game approach that it's not just at site, but I really think that the gym is incredible. I mean, you go to the gym at 6 a.m. of before showdown, you know who's going to be there. You know the type
So
of person
true.
who's going to be in the gym. But the gym and breakfast, and every time I go to breakfast, I have at least 3 breakfasts. I bring my breakfast over here. I qualify the people here, and then I say, okay, thank you very much. And I go bring it over there, and I do it time and again. It's just, that's what a salesperson does. They're not there for brand or they're not a success person that's really going deep. They're trying to qualify and say, hey, is this a relevant person? And they're going one by one. So you need people who are really outgoing, but you can see already in these discussions, are they having their Starbucks coffee or the conference coffee? You can try and understand, what do they talk about in their off time? How do they describe what they're there to do? And so those conversations that would happen at the breakfast table, in the gym, in the elevator, can actually help the salespeople who are otherwise locked behind a screen and a phone.
After the conference, there's a follow-up with people that you've met or people that you may not have bumped into that you were planning on it. Like you said, your follow-up and content creation. The people that host the conference, they obviously send out a thank you, here's an asset, here's some content. Do you ever utilize that?
I'm more full on at this show. I really believe that was the opportunity. I see this as a ladder. The emails and the LinkedIn's and the phone were building and building and building. If I had the opportunity to be with them face to face, that's the highest level. So I don't want to go back in terms of the hierarchy here. So what I try and do is at show, I try and agree to next step and have it locked in. Sending a document is probably a step back. Not everyone's ready to go forward, but I really want to have a next step in the calendar book right then and there. At that breakfast example, I would actually say, looks like I caught you with your mouth full. It sounds like this would be interesting. Can we put something on the calendar for Tuesday? It sounds so silly, but what I don't want to do is say, oh, give me your business card, and then I'll just be another email in your box. I have to make my whole pitch again. That's not going to work. I think I want to make sure that if I've gone to this higher level, I'm going to lock it in there. So the answer is yes, we do all that stuff, and I really train my teams to do that. But I have this idea of, once you're face to face, that's difficult to do. And not everyone's able to have those adult conversations. But when you're there, then lock in at that point. You don't want to be downgraded to an email conversation at that point. You want to try and lock in and see how you can move it forward.
I think it's all these things that people haven't even thought of, hasn't even, crossed their mind, of how effective it is to actually rather do all of that sort of nurturing, getting to know the person in person, as opposed to just following up with some words.
Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity at the conference itself. This was more giving a sales, a pre and post of how people are digital sales and how we move them and really up their game. The actual conference and the lead generation there is actually significant as well, but that's probably a whole other discussion. There's a Bible that can be written about that.
If there's anything else that you'd like to speak about, you're more than welcome to.
No, I think that it's just I like this hive mind and how we're sharing ideas, and I know that we're always talking about how to do a better call opener or how we lock it in on the phone. I wanted to just give this different perspective because we oftentimes think about field marketing and remote or inside sales, and so I wanted actually to bridge that gap on it. And there's different companies that have different policies. Only the account executives go, and I really think that we need to actually bring deeper funnel forward. So I think that that's what I'm trying to shed the light, that I want to, as someone who's responsible from the outset, I was talking about marketing and sales. What you want to do is you want to bring those people who are really responsible for bringing that funnel. You want to bring them down. You want to get them a sense of what is a good conversation. What's an AE going to want? What's the customer success? What are those conversations about? And then if you give them a little bit more of that knowledge, then they're going to be much more effective at the top of the funnel.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for meeting with me. It's been such a pleasure to hear your insights and expertise. And conferences was something that I was speaking to Claire about and Kayla about. We've seen some of our other partners and their companies, how while they've networked at these conferences, some of our partners have been speakers, and how beneficial that is to say, that's one of our partners, speaking at the conference. That is something we are really trying to push. Obviously, time is a thing, but I think the reward on it would be immense for someone from Whistle to attend the conferences, David to speak to someone, just kind of network and that.
Yeah, I think that that's an opportunity as a service provider. I don't know if which conferences people are looking for, service providers versus technologies versus industry insights and expertise. So it really depends on how do you move your storyline into that. I think that that's a bigger challenge, and that's always for each brand and each ICP. It's a story about how you get your narrative in there. So that's where the selecting of, okay, which is the audience and which is my ICP, what's my share of voice, all those type of questions that we've started discussing.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for joining us on Whistle Talks. And we'll definitely be in touch in the future.
Great. Thank you for having me, Kayla.